They called it the family asset. I called it the $1.5 million house I paid for. I overheard my sister's wedding plans in my own living room. 200 guests and a piano we never owned. I didn't confront them. I smiled, pulled out my phone, and recorded. 6 weeks later, film crew trucks blocked the waterfront, and my mother screamed about family tradition. I just raised my hand and dropped the final evidence. My name is Noelle Whitaker. I am 32 years old. I live by logic, at Vesper Ridge Advisory. My job is not to guess. It is to calculate. I build predictive models for high-stakes financial markets. I analyze risk. I identify liabilities. Emotions, I have learned, are the ultimate liability. They create volatility. They skew the data. They lead to catastrophic, avoidable losses. My marriage was a catastrophic, avoidable loss. It was a 5-year education in the destructive power of feeling over fact. When I finally ran the numbers on that partnership, the deficit was staggering. My ex-husband, Mark, was a black hole of vague promises and emotional overdrafts. The divorce was not a tragedy. It was a market correction, painful, necessary, and in the end, highly profitable. This house is the dividend. It sits on a protected stretch of waterfront in Cape May, New Jersey, shielded by high dunes and reinforced concrete. It cost $1.5 million. I paid cash. This was not family money. It was not an inheritance or a gift. It was the fully liquidated assets of a life I built and then systematically dismantled. I call it the fortress. It has 4,000 square feet of defensible space. The windows are impact-resistant glass, rated for a Category 3 hurricane. The doors do not have keyholes. They have biometric scanners and digital keypads. The entire property is covered by a commercial-grade surveillance system I monitor from my phone. I bought it 6 months after the divorce decree was finalized. It is the only place on earth where all the variables are under my control. My family, the Whitakers, operates on an entirely different ledger. It is a closed system built on obligation, implied debt, and social appearances. My mother, Marjorie, is the chief executive. Her currency is guilt. My father, Alan, is the silent partner, the comptroller. He absorbs the losses, audits the receipts, and never, ever challenges the board. And then there is my sister, Brielle. She is 25, beautiful, and perpetually subsidized. She is the company's prize asset, the one they are always attempting to leverage for a better social position. Our relationship is transactional. It is a facade maintained for holidays and strategic check-ins. We speak in polite surfaces, in codes I have long since cracked. How is work, Noelle? This translates to, are you still making enough money to remain useful to us? Brielle has the most wonderful news. This translates to, a significant and unplanned expense is forthcoming. We simply must all get together at your beach house soon. This translates to, we intend to use your property. For years, I played my part. I was the reliable elder daughter, the high-yield investment. I was the one who paid for the new roof on their aging colonial in Cherry Hill. I was the one who co-signed Brielle's first car lease, a BMW she could not afford. I was the one who funded Marjorie's disastrous foray into artisanal catering, a vanity project that evaporated $50,000 in 6 months. I was the dependable asset that always paid out. They were the non-performing debt that never matured. The divorce changed the terms of the agreement. When I signed that final sheaf of papers, I was not just ending a marriage, I was closing my account with the Bank of Whitaker. No more automatic withdrawals. No more covering their emotional or financial shortfalls. I had spent my 20s allowing my life to be decided for me. First by their expectations, then by Mark's. That was over. My 30s would be about ownership. This house was the first and most absolute declaration of that independence. Ownership is a clean concept. It is precise. It is documented, verifiable, and filed with the county. Title, deed, possession. Blood is the opposite. It is messy, abstract, and weaponized. But we're family, Marjorie would say, a phrase that always, without fail, preceded an outrageous request. Blood was the invisible ink on a contract I had never agreed to. Blood was the justification for every boundary crossed, every assumption made. It's the perfect family asset, my mother had announced during her first and only invited visit, shortly after I closed. It is my property, Mom, I corrected her, my voice flat, leaving no room for interpretation. It is not an asset for the family's balance sheet. She laughed, a brittle, sharp sound that didn't touch her eyes. The offense was logged. Marjorie does not forgive challenges to her perceived authority. She does not forget. She simply waits for a moment of perceived weakness, and then she moves. I exist by the sound of the ocean. It is the only noise that calms the analysis. It is a rhythmic, predictable surge. It is pure data. It washes away the day's noise, the chatter of the market, the incessant, high-frequency demands of Vesper Ridge. The sound is clean. My family's sound is different. It is the sound of whispers, plans made in adjacent rooms, expectations murmured just loud enough to be overheard. Their communication is ambient, strategic. It is the sharp, insistent tap of my mother's fingernails on her phone as she texts, demands to her social circle. It is the high, anxious trill of Brielle's voice when she wants something she knows she cannot justify. It is the rustle of paper as my father silently reconciles accounts, erasing himself from the conflict. They are the noise that invades the quiet. The week it all began. The air was thick, heavy with late summer humidity. I was deep in analysis. Closing a hostile acquisition for Vesper Ridge, I was logging 90-hour weeks, the kind of sustained, cellular-level focus that leaves you blind to anything outside the spreadsheet. I was tired. I was scheduled to attend a mandatory corporate retreat in the Hamptons, but the deal was fragile. I pushed the trip. I decided to relocate, to work from the Cape May house instead. Better bandwidth, absolute security, and the sound of the surf. On Thursday, I drove down from my apartment in the city. The 2-hour drive was a decompression. I left the noise of Manhattan and entered my sanctuary. I spent all of Friday in my office. The sliding glass door opened just enough to hear the waves. The numbers on my screens finally aligned. The deal was stabilizing. The model was holding. Saturday morning, I was supposed to be finalizing the 112-page presentation binder. I printed a final draft. I sat on the main deck, coffee in hand, making margin notes. The ocean was calm, a sheet of dark blue. The air was clear. I felt, for a fleeting, dangerous moment, completely at peace. Then my phone buzzed. A text. My mother. "We're in the area? Stopping by to say hello? Bringing lunch?" It was not a request. It was a notification of a perimeter breach. My stress response is analytical. Threat detected. Probability of disruption. 100%. Expected duration of disruption. Minimum 4 hours. They arrived 40 minutes later. It was not lunch. It was an invasion force. They brought coolers, beach chairs, 3 bottles of Prosecco, and Brielle's new fiancé, Derek Lawson. Derek, the human equivalent of a speculative, high-risk startup, all polished branding, 0 verifiable fundamentals. Marjorie, naturally, adored him. They treated the house like a timeshare they owned. Marjorie immediately began pointing out where the furniture should go. Brielle and Derek wandered onto my private boardwalk to take selfies, geotagging my location. My father settled into an Adirondack chair, opened his newspaper, and promptly vanished behind it. "Noelle, darling, the lighting in this kitchen is simply dreadful for entertaining," Marjorie announced, halfway through a sandwich I had not asked for and did not want. "I'm not entertaining. Mom, I'm working. This is my office." "Nonsense," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "This house was made for parties. We must have your father's 70th here in the fall." I just stared at her, my coffee cooling in my hand. "The house is not available." She smiled. It was that tight, dismissive smile, the one that says, "Your opinion is noted and has been deemed irrelevant. We will discuss it later, dear." The afternoon was a siege. They stayed for 5 hours. 5 hours of ambient noise, of assumptions, of entitlement layered on entitlement. When they finally left, descending on the house like a summer storm and leaving just as abruptly, the entire structure felt contaminated. The quiet was gone. I spent an hour wiping down counters they had used, resetting the thermostat, and erasing the physical evidence of their presence. I felt the old exhaustion, the familiar, cellular-level drain, the high unspoken cost of blood. I went to bed early, the sound of the ocean struggling to reclaim the space. I woke up Sunday. The house was quiet again. My house, my space. I went to my office to find the final presentation file. It was not on the desk. It was not in the printer tray. I checked my briefcase. Nothing. I must have left it in the den. I'd been reviewing it there before the invasion yesterday. I walked down the main hall, my feet silent on the cool oak flooring. The den is adjacent to the main living room, separated by a set of heavy pocket doors that I usually leave open. I heard them before I saw them. I stopped, my breath caught. They were back. They had not knocked. They had not texted. They must have used the emergency keypad code, the one Marjorie swore was only for a fire or a flood. I did not move. I stood in the hallway, shielded by the architecture. This was not a visit. This was a conspiracy. I hadn't forgotten a file. I had stumbled into a performance, a full-blown production meeting, and I was the only one who didn't have the script. I did not get to where I am by hoping. I got here by signing. My signature is my power. It is on my employment contract with Vesper Ridge, a document that guarantees me a 7-figure bonus. It was on the dissolution papers that clawed back my independence. It is on the deed to this $1.5 million fortress, filed, recorded, and absolute. Paper is finite. Paper is proof. Paper is the weapon that defeats blood every single time. Blood is an argument. A deed is a fact. What they were planning in that room, what I was about to hear, was a fantasy. It was a theft based on assumptions. They were voting to steal my sanctuary, and they didn't even realize they were trespassing. I do not do epilogues. I do not believe in lingering resolutions or messy, drawn-out reconciliations. I believe in closing the books. When an asset becomes toxic, you liquidate it, you cut the loss, you absorb the write-down, and you rebalance the portfolio. My family had finally, irrevocably, become a toxic asset. As I stood there, silent in the hall, I knew this wasn't going to be a simple no. A simple no was just an invitation for negotiation, for guilt, for another assault. This required a structured, documented, legal response. They were planning their future based on the perceived power of Marjorie's will, but my mother, for all her social maneuvering, fundamentally misunderstands the modern world. She thinks tradition is binding. She forgot about the one thing I control absolutely, the one thing that overrides every tradition she holds dear. She forgot about the power of my signature, and I had just prepared a stack of legal documents that were waiting for it. To understand the Whittaker dynamic, you must first understand my mother, Marjorie. She is a woman who lives her life as if it were a performance for an unseen, highly critical audience. Appearance is not part of the substance. It is the substance. Her entire identity is curated, the right neighborhood, the right country club, even when the dues strained them, the right friends, and most importantly, the right children. We were not raised. We were produced. My father, Alan, is her foil. He is a man made of beige flannel and quiet avoidance. Where Marjorie charges into conflict, Alan retreats. He vanishes into his workshop, into the dense columns of the newspaper, or simply into his own silence. He is the family accountant, the man who ensures the checks clear for Marjorie's social ambitions, but he offers no opinion on the expenditures. Conflict, in his eyes, is a terrible noise. Silence is peace. This dynamic, her overwhelming force, his total lack of resistance, created the vacuum in which Brielle and I were raised. Brielle is my mother's masterpiece. She is 25 years old, agonizingly beautiful, and profoundly suggestible. She is soft clay that Marjorie has been molding since birth. Brielle internalized the family ethos. Your value is determined by who you marry and how good the wedding photos look. Enter Derek Lawson. Derek is, by all of Marjorie's metrics, a perfect acquisition. He comes from good stock, which means old money, however diluted. He is handsome in that generic catalog way. He works in finance, a term as vague and impressive as Marjorie needed it to be. He was the exact man my mother wanted. Whether Brielle wanted him was irrelevant. Family first! This was the Whittaker family crest. Marjorie deployed it constantly. It was the closing argument for every unreasonable demand. Family first meant you came home for Christmas, even if your marriage was collapsing. Family first meant you did not talk about unpleasantness, like my divorce. But what family first always meant, in practice, was Marjorie first. I used to be an academic. I was smart. I was too smart. In my mother's estimation, men do not like a woman who argues. Noel. I was accepted into a fully funded doctoral program in applied mathematics at Stanford. It was my escape, my exit visa from the Whittaker ledger. Marjorie manufactured a crisis. My father's stress, the burden on the family, Brielle's anxiety. She did not forbid me from going. That is not her style. She used honeyed words. It is just such a long way away, darling, and your father relies on you. We all do. This is your responsibility to the family. The guilt was a physical weight. I turned down Stanford. I took a local job in finance. Something respectable and, critically, lucrative. I stayed within her orbit. It was the single greatest regret of my life, and the mistake I swore I would never repeat. Our family dinners were audits. They were held weekly, usually at a restaurant slightly too expensive for their budget, which I was often expected to cover under the guise of celebrating. At these dinners, my mother would hold court. She would recount the sacrifices, the braces, the tuition, which I had actually paid back, the sleepless nights. These stories were not reminiscences. They were invoices. They were the presentation of debt, and our quiet attention was the installment payment. We were expected to listen, to nod, and to feel the crushing weight of our obligation. While Marjorie spoke, my father engaged in a private ritual. He was a collector, a quiet archivist of their lives. He would neaten the edges of the restaurant check. He would fold the receipt just so and slip it into his wallet. At home, his workshop was not just for woodworking, it was a library of file cabinets. He kept everything: receipts for groceries from 1998, bank statements, old utility bills, canceled checks. Marjorie saw it as a harmless eccentricity. Alan and his little papers, she would laugh. I saw it differently. It was not eccentricity. It was evidence. It was the only way he knew how to exert control. He could not win the argument, but he could preserve the facts. He was building a case, perhaps even against himself. It was a habit that, much later, would prove invaluable. Brielle did want a wedding on the beach. I knew this. She had pinned hundreds of images to her secret Pinterest boards, which I had seen by accident. Sunsets, driftwood arches, bare feet on the sand. My house, the Cape May house, was her literal dream location. But Brielle is incapable of asking. To ask is to risk being told no. Instead, she wishes, she hints, she sighs, she leaves catalogs open on the coffee table. She creates a vacuum of desire, knowing full well that Marjorie will rush in to fill it. Brielle gets what she wants, but she never has to take responsibility for the request. It was always Mom's idea. When I bought the Cape May house, I was not just buying property, I was buying security. I designed the defenses specifically to counteract my family's methods. Their primary weapon is the assumption, the casual boundary pushing, the just dropping by. My first act was installing the smart locks, no physical keys, just codes. Codes I could create, and more importantly, codes I could delete. My office contains a floor safe, bolted to the concrete slab. This is where the real family jewels are kept. The deed to the house, my corporate contracts, the divorce decree, my passport, every document that defines who I am, separate from them, my entire life, itemized and fireproofed. Guilt is the invisible ink on the Whitaker family contract, as the eldest child, the responsible one. I was the primary signatory. I was born indebted for my birth, for my education, for the food I ate. This debt was unpayable. It had no principal amount and no maturity date. It just accrued compound interest in the form of my mother's expectations. My successes were not my own. They were payments against this imagined loan. My salary was just a resource to be tapped. My home, an asset to be leveraged. Marjorie is a master of the retroactive narrative edit. She rewrites history in real time. Noelle, do not be silly. You offered to pay for the new roof. You insisted. I had not. I had been presented with a bill and a sob story about a leak, and I paid it to stop the phone calls. You were always so generous with your money. You loved helping out. This is how generous became twisted. It was not a choice. It was a character trait she assigned to me, one that I was obligated to uphold, lest I be accused of being selfish or changing. My compliance was rebranded as my personality. I gave my mother one code to the smart lock. 1. For emergencies, Mom, a fire, a flood, a medical event. I knew, even as I gave it to her, that I was making a mistake. It was a concession to the old dynamic, a single point of vulnerability in an otherwise hardened system. Of course, darling, an emergency. I would never dream of using it otherwise, she had said, her eyes already scanning the living room, assessing the value of the furniture. That emergency code was the seed. It was the crack in the fortress wall. It was the implied permission she had been waiting for. My attempt at a boundary was, in her mind, an invitation. The day after they left the beach house, after the 5-hour siege, my phone buzzed. I was back in my city apartment, attempting to scrub the weekend's events from my mind, trying to focus on the Vesper Ridge deal. It was Marjorie, a text message. Darling, we must all go to dinner this Friday. 7:30, the Rittenhouse Grill. We have the most wonderful, exciting news to discuss as a family. Dress nicely. It's a big celebration. The Rittenhouse Grill, old money, dark wood, enormous checks. News. Celebration. The trap was being set. This was not a discussion. This was an announcement. She was taking the campaign public. She was moving her troops into position, in a fancy restaurant where I could not possibly make a scene. I typed back one word, fine. I closed the phone. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the schematics for the Cape May House security system. Then I opened a new browser tab and began searching for high-fidelity audio recording devices. That text message about the Rittenhouse Grill dinner was a summons. It was the formal invitation to my own execution, I knew, with the certainty of a market projection, that Friday's wonderful news was the public announcement of my house's appropriation. Marjorie was moving the asset from my private portfolio to the public, social one. I needed to go back. It was Tuesday. The Vesper Ridge deal was still breathing down my neck, but the binder I had been annotating, the physical 112-page book, was still on the coffee table in the den. I had left it there when my family invaded on Saturday. I needed it. That, at least, was the logical justification for the 2-hour drive back to Cape May on a weekday afternoon. The drive down was different. The fortress no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a target. I felt the low hum of anxiety, an emotion I despise. It is inefficient. It is noise in the data. I turned onto my street just before 1 p.m. The ocean was a flat, slate gray. The air was still, and my mother's white Lexus SUV was in my driveway. Brielle's convertible was parked behind it. My first thought was not anger. It was a cold, sharp calculation. Today was Tuesday. The dinner was Friday. This was an unscheduled, unauthorized entry. My phone showed no alerts, no texts. I checked the security log. Marjorie, emergency code, 12:41 p.m. An emergency, a fire, a flood, a medical event. I parked my car down the street, out of sight. I did not walk up the driveway. I took the service path, a narrow boardwalk shielded by the dunes that leads to the side terrace. I am silent when I move. I have always been the quiet one. The house was built to capture the sound of the ocean. The main living room has 2 sets of sliding glass doors. They were open. The breeze was carrying the sound of their voices out onto the deck. I stopped. I stood by a pillar, completely obscured, and I listened. And the caterer agrees. Mom, if we set the bar up here on the terrace, the flow is much better. That was Brielle. Her voice was high, excited. The bar. Yes, Marjorie's voice, clipped and authoritative. But Derek's parents will need somewhere to sit, away from the music. We can use Noelle's office. We will just move her desk into the garage. My breath did not catch. My heart did not pound. It was as if I was floating, observing. My body went cold. They were not visiting. They were conducting a site survey. I heard the rustle of paper, a floor plan. This is the real genius, Marjorie said, her voice dripping with self-congratulation. It is the family asset. Brielle, it was always meant to be used for something important. This house is our statement. The family asset. The words hit me like a physical force. It was not just a phrase. It was a verdict. It was the finalizing of the theft. I just love it, Brielle sighed. It's exactly what I dreamed of. A wedding on the sand, and the reception right here. 200 people. Mom, are you sure it will fit? 200, not 50, not 60, 200 people, on my decks, in my house. It will be tight, but it will be magnificent, Marjorie said. We will have the string quartet by the entrance, and the grand piano. I've already sourced a beautiful white baby grand. We'll go here, in the center of the living room. What about Noelle's sofa? In the garage, with the desk, Marjorie said impatiently. Darling, you cannot be sentimental about furniture. This is about the line, the photographs. Then came the moment that changed everything. The moment that moved this from appropriation to active destruction. The kitchen is the only problem, Marjorie said. I heard her heels click on the oak floor as she moved. This wall, the one between the kitchen and the den, it blocks the view of the sunset. It ruins the photo line for the head table. Brielle murmured agreement. It does make it dark. So, Marjorie said, in the tone she used when she had solved a complex social problem, we knock it out. I leaned my head against the cool concrete pillar. Did I hear that correctly? Knock it out? Brielle's voice was a whisper. Mom, we cannot. It is just drywall. Brielle, we get a contractor in. 2 days. They take it out. They mud the seams. It creates a magnificent great room, a perfect clean shot from the deck right through to the front. It is the only way. I have already booked a consultation for next week. They were planning demolition. They were planning to take a sledgehammer to the structural integrity of my $1.5 million house. And in that entire conversation, that entire 10-minute strategic dissection of my life, not once did either of them use the words, "Ask Noelle." Not once did they say, "I wonder if she will agree." It was done, in their minds. The title had already been transferred. I had my key in my hand. I had been about to put it in the side door. My fingers slowly closed around the cold metal. I did not move. I did not breathe. If I confronted them now, what would happen? I ran the simulation. I would burst in. They would be shocked. Marjorie would immediately pivot. Noelle, you startled us. What are you doing to my house? Darling, we were just planning. We were going to tell you on Friday. It is a surprise. You are knocking down a wall. Do not be so dramatic. It was just an idea. You are overreacting. Why are you so selfish? This is for your sister. Brielle would cry. Marjorie would accuse. I would be the villain, the angry, ungenerous, hysterical older sister. It would be my word against theirs, a misunderstanding, a simple, excited planning session that I had twisted into something ugly. I am a data analyst, I do not act without data. I backed away. I moved as silently as I had arrived. I walked down the service path, got into my car, and drove away. My binder, my presentation, was still on the coffee table, right next to their floor plans. It did not matter. I drove to a small coffee shop in town. I ordered a large black coffee. I sat at a small table in the back corner. I did not drink the coffee. I just stared at the dark liquid. I sat there for 2 hours. My mind was not chaotic. It was focused. It was a machine running risk models. Liability. Identified. Marjorie Whittaker, Brielle Whittaker. Nature of threat. Unauthorized use, appropriation, and willful destruction of a primary asset. Associated risk. Total financial loss. Total loss of security. Gaslighting probability. 100%. I could not win this with an argument. I could not win with emotion. I could not win by appealing to family or fairness. Those were their weapons. I had to win this with my weapons: logic, documentation, and undeniable, empirical proof. I left the coffee shop. I drove back to the house. The driveway was empty. My security log showed they had left an hour ago. I used my own code. The house was silent. It was pristine. They had washed their coffee cups. They had plumped the pillows. But it was not pristine. It was a crime scene. I found my binder on the den table. Underneath it was a magazine. Modern Bride. Open to a page featuring sunset receptions. I walked through the house. I stood where they stood. I saw the piano. I saw the bar. I looked at the kitchen wall. I ran my hand over the cool, smooth drywall. They were going to take a hammer to it. That night, I did not sleep. I went online. I used my corporate credit card. I ordered 5 professional-grade, voice-activated micro-recorders, the kind journalists use. They were smaller than my thumb, had a 100-hour battery life, and crystal-clear audio capture. They would be delivered by 10 a.m. the next day. I drove back to the city, got the devices, and returned to Cape May on Wednesday afternoon. I became a different person. I was no longer an analyst. I was a counterintelligence operative. I placed the first one in the living room, hidden in the recess under the built-in bookshelf, invisible unless you were lying on the floor. I placed the second in the kitchen, high up in the dead space above the cabinetry. The third went into the den, taped to the back of a heavy-framed abstract painting. The fourth went on to the main terrace, sealed in a small, waterproof bag and tucked deep inside an ornamental, non-functional lantern. The last one was for my office, just in case. I activated them, then I created a new spreadsheet on my encrypted laptop. Project Whittaker, I logged the device locations, I synced the security system. Every time the emergency code was used, my phone would alert me, and I would know the recorders were active. My phone pinged the next day, Thursday, Marjorie. Emergency code, 2:15 p.m. This time, she brought the decorator. I listened to the feed live, my heart pounding a low, steady, metallic rhythm. They talked fabrics. They talked lighting. They talked about the problem wall. I saved the file. I drove down Friday morning, hours before the dinner. I retrieved the memory cards. I sat in my car, in a public parking lot overlooking the ocean, and I put in my noise-canceling headphones. I listened to the raw files from the past 2 days. It was all there. The piano, the 200 guests, the demolition, the assumption. And then, I heard the exchange that solidified my resolve. It was from Thursday. The decorator had left. It was just Marjorie and Brielle. Brielle's voice was small, tentative. "Mom, are you sure Noelle is okay with all this? She seemed stressed on Saturday. What if she says no?" Then, my mother's voice. The audio was perfect. There was no wind, just her words, cold and clear as glass. Noelle does not get to say no. Noelle doesn't get to be stressed. She is indebted to this family from the day she was born. Her success is our success. This house is the least she can do. She's just lucky we're letting her contribute. I closed my laptop. The data was clean. The liability was confirmed. I had the evidence. I drove back to the city. I showered. I put on my most expensive black sheath dress, and I went to dinner. The Rittenhouse Grill is not a restaurant. It is a fortress of old-world validation. It is all dark mahogany, heavy silver, and hushed, obsequious waiters. The air is thick with the smell of old money and mutual, unspoken agreements. It is, in short, my mother's natural habitat. This was her chosen battlefield. I arrived at exactly 7:30. I was wearing the black sheath dress, a single string of pearls, armor. I felt nothing. The audio file of my mother describing me as indebted was playing on a silent loop in my head. They were already seated at the best table in the center of the room. Marjorie, radiant in cobalt blue. Alan, my father, already halfway invisible in his gray suit. Brielle, glowing. Her hand draped conspicuously on the tablecloth so the engagement ring would catch the light. And Derek, smug, already sipping a scotch. But they were not alone. Marjorie had brought her audience. "Noelle, darling," she trilled, loud enough for the adjacent tables to hear. "You remember the Hendersons, of course, and the DuPonts." My smile was a precise, calculated, muscular arrangement. "Of course, Mrs. Henderson, Mr. and Mrs. DuPont, how lovely to see you." The Hendersons and the DuPonts were not just friends. They were pillars of the social circle Marjorie was desperate to cement. They were the arbiters of her success, and they were the witnesses she had gathered for my public surrender. The dinner was a performance. We talked about the market, about the Hendersons' recent trip to Palm Beach, about the DuPont's charity gala. I played my part. I was the polite, successful, and slightly boring elder daughter. I asked the right questions. I laughed at the right, muted intervals. Brielle just beamed, a beautiful, silent prop. Then, as the dessert menus were being presented, Marjorie placed her hand on Brielle's. She tapped her champagne flute with a knife. "If I could have everyone's attention for just one moment," she said. Her voice was practiced, filled with a false, trembling emotion. The Hendersons and the DuPonts leaned in, smiling benevolently. "As you know, our darling Brielle is engaged to this wonderful man, Derek." She paused for the polite murmurs. "We have been simply bursting with the news. We have set the date, this September." "How wonderful," Mrs. Henderson cooed. "And the venue? Have you found a venue?" This was the cue. Marjorie turned her gaze to me. It was a look of pure, theatrical love. It was nauseating. "We have," she said, her voice dropping, as if overcome. "My wonderful, generous Noelle." She reached for my hand across the table. I let her take it. Her skin was cold. "Has insisted on opening her magnificent home in Cape May for us. She is giving her sister the wedding of her dreams." The trap was sprung. The air solidified. All eyes were on me. Mrs. DuPont's perfectly plucked eyebrows rose in approval. "Noelle, how truly generous. That house is simply stunning. A true family asset." There it was again, the family asset. If I pulled my hand away, if I corrected her, if I said, "That is an absolute lie," what would happen? I would be the monster, the cruel, selfish, bitter spinster who had ruined her sister's perfect moment. I would be a social pariah before the sorbet even arrived. Marjorie knew this. She was holding me hostage with social convention. So I smiled. It was the best, most convincing smile of my career. I squeezed her hand gently. "Of course," I said, my voice soft. "Anything for Brielle. We are all so happy." The table erupted. "Bravo! Marvelous!" The Hendersons and DuPonts applauded. My father looked visibly relieved. Sinking further into his chair, Brielle's eyes filled with genuine, happy tears. Marjorie's smile was pure, unadulterated triumph. She had won. She had locked me in. The Hendersons' son, a social media manager, immediately took a picture. "The happy family. This is going viral." The rest of the dinner was a blur. I excused myself as soon as was polite, claiming an early meeting. Marjorie kissed me goodbye. a dry proprietary peck on the cheek. "You have made us all so proud, darling," she whispered. I did not go home. I went to my office. By the time I powered up my workstation, the infection was already spreading. Brielle had posted the photo from the restaurant, celebrating my dream wedding with my fiancé and my amazing, generous sister Noelle, who is giving us her beach house for the big day. Family asset Cape May wedding blessed. The comments were a flood of congratulations and praise for my selflessness. The next morning, the emails began. They did not come from Marjorie. They came directly to my Vesper Ridge inbox. She had given my professional email address to every vendor in New Jersey. The first was from Elite Catering. Subject, Whitaker's Lawson Wedding, deposit invoice. Dear Ms. Whitaker, per your mother, Marjorie's final selections, please find attached the invoice for the 200-guest tasting menu. We are so looking forward to serving you at your beautiful property. Attached was a non-refundable deposit request for $25,000. The second was from White Glove Rentals. Subject, FWD. Floor plan confirmation. This was a forward from Marjorie. Noelle, please see attached. This confirms the White Baby grand piano, the string quartet chairs, and the 200 Chiavari chairs for the deck. Please handle the confirmation. The third was from Coastal Demolition. Subject, consultation, Whitaker Residence. Dear Ms. Whitaker, we are confirmed for next Tuesday at 10 a.m. to assess the load-bearing properties of the kitchen den wall for removal, as requested by Marjorie. My hands were perfectly steady. I was not angry. I was impressed. The audacity was orchestral in its scope. She had not just implicated me. She had made me the legally responsible party. I was now the primary contact for contracts, invoices, and structural demolition. I opened the encrypted Project Whitaker file. I created a new subfolder. Evidence, Phase 2. I did not reply to a single email. I saved every single one. I saved the headers. I saved the attachments. I saved the metadata. I took time-stamped, full-page screenshots of Brielle's social media posts and the gushing comments. I backed the entire folder up to an offline solid-state drive, which I then locked in my office safe. Then, the final piece arrived, an email from Marjorie herself. Subject, urgent, wedding layout. Noelle, attached is the finalized staging map from the wedding planner. This is not optional. We need you to move all your personal furniture from the main floor and your office into the garage by next Friday. The painters are arriving that afternoon to touch up the walls, and the rental deliveries begin the following Monday. We are on a very tight schedule. Do not delay this. The attachment was a crudely drawn PDF. My office was labeled Bridal Suite. My den was Coat Check. The entire main floor was a grid of tables, and there, a thick red line bisecting the kitchen, labeled, Wall to be removed. This was it. This was the whole case. It was no longer a misunderstanding. It was not a family discussion. This was a documented, intentional, coordinated plan to invade, seize, and destroy my property. I looked at the layout map, then at the email from the demolition company. I looked at the $25,000 invoice addressed to me. While I was building my fortress, Marjorie had been building her army. The entire operation had one flaw. It was all predicated on a single, false assumption that I was still the person they had raised, that I was the girl who had given up Stanford, that I would absorb any cost to avoid a public scene. I looked at my calendar. I was supposed to be in Chicago for Vesper Ridge. I canceled the trip. I picked up my phone. I did not call my mother. I did not call the demolition company. I Googled best real estate litigators, Philadelphia. The next afternoon, I was sitting in a steel and glass conference room 20 floors above the city, facing Avery Cole. Avery was not what I expected. She was young, impeccably dressed in a razor-sharp gray suit, and had a smile that did not comfort so much as dissect. She was, I realized, exactly like me, just in a different field. "Please," she said, gesturing to the table, "walk me through it." I did not cry. I did not rage. I opened my laptop. I put the encrypted drive on the table. I have organized the data chronologically, I said. Folder 1 contains audio files of the initial planning, including intent to trespass and destroy property. Folder 2 contains the public social media declarations. Folder 3 contains all unsolicited vendor contracts, invoices, and communications addressed to me. Folder 4 contains the direct written order from my mother to vacate my own premises and the accompanying demolition schematic. I pushed the laptop toward her. The asset in question is a $1.5 million property in Cape May. The title is solely in my name, free and clear. I have it here. For 20 minutes, the only sound was the clicking of her mouse. She read everything. She listened to the audio clip of my mother calling me indebted. She analyzed the demolition email. Her expression did not change. When she was finished, she leaned back. Well, Ms. Whitaker, this is the cleanest case of premeditated trespass and conspiracy to commit criminal mischief I have seen this year. They have handed you their entire plan, in writing. They are remarkably stupid. They are not stupid, I corrected her. They are arrogant. They have operated on this model my entire life. They believe emotion and social pressure supersede the law. They are about to learn that they do not. So, Avery said, her eyes lighting up. What is the desired outcome? A cease and desist? We can have them served by tomorrow. We can file for a restraining order. I shook my head. No, a cease and desist is a warning. They will pivot. They will lie. They will retreat, regroup, and start a smear campaign. My mother will play the victim. My sister will be the heartbroken bride. I will be the villain. That is an emotional battle. I will not fight on their turf. Avery leaned forward, sensing it. What then? I want this to go to the mat. I want them to follow through. I want them to sign the contracts. I want them to show up with the piano and the 200 chairs. I want them to bring the sledgehammers. Avery looked at me, a slow smile spreading across her face. It was the smile of a shark that has just scented blood. I see, she said. You are not just trying to stop this. You are building a trap. I am building a case, I countered. I have the intent. I have the conspiracy. Now I need the act. That is a high-risk, high-reward strategy. Noelle, it requires impeccable timing, and it could get very, very messy. I do not mind messy, I said. I mind losing. Avery nodded. She stood up and walked to the window overlooking the city. There is one thing we must do immediately. Verify the title. Just to ensure there are no ancient family trust covenants, no lingering liens, 100% clean. She typed for a moment on her terminal, pulling the county records. She printed a single sheet of paper and slid it across the table. Owner, Noelle Whitaker, sole. There it is, she said. The fortress is secure. She sat back down. All right, Noelle, here is the plan. You do nothing. You do not answer the emails. You do not reply to your mother. You go dark. Let them panic. Let them escalate. Let them spend the money. They are building our case for us. And when they show up, I asked, when the trucks arrive? Avery's smile returned. It was terrifying. We are not stopping a wedding, Noelle, she said. We are just changing the stage. I followed Avery's advice to the letter. I went completely dark. The effect was instantaneous and profound. My silence, after a lifetime of immediate, resentful compliance, was a disruption in the market. It created a panic. First came the emails. The subject lines in my Project Whitaker inbox grew increasingly frantic. Subject, urgent. Need your signature on rental contract. Subject, Noelle. Call me. The caterer needs the deposit. Subject, demolition consultation. Where are you? Then came the texts, a rapid-fire barrage from Marjorie. Noelle, this is not funny. The demolition team is booked for Tuesday. You need to wire the $25,000 to the caterer. I gave them your word. Do you understand how much work this is? You are being incredibly selfish and disrespectful. If you do not move your furniture by this Friday, I am hiring movers and sending you the bill. Answer your phone. Then, the voicemails. They were a symphony of escalating hysteria. Brielle's high, watery anxiety. Noelle, please call Mom back. She is so stressed. We are all just trying to make this perfect. Why are you doing this? And Marjorie's. The honeyed tone was gone. It was replaced by the sharp, acidic voice of a CEO whose orders were being ignored. Noelle, I do not know what kind of childish game you are playing, but it ends. Now, this wedding is happening. You will not ruin this for your sister. I will not let you. I did not answer. I did not reply. I sat in my city apartment, listening to the voicemails on speakerphone, my laptop open. I saved each message as an MP3. I dragged the file into the Evidence Phase 3 folder. I was no longer a participant. I was an archivist. While they were screaming into the void, Avery and I were mobilizing. Our first stop was not the city. It was the Homeowners Association for the Cape May property. I was a member in good standing. Avery, acting as my counsel, requisitioned the full articles of incorporation, the bylaws, and the governing covenants, conditions, and restrictions. It was a 180-page document, bound in a cheap blue cover. I read it, and I understood why my neighbors were so quiet. Section 12, Subsection 4, Events and Gatherings. The language was absolute. No gathering in excess of 60 persons shall be permitted on any property, for any reason, without express written application and approval from the board, submitted no less than 90 days prior to the event. Section 14. Noise and Nuisance. All outdoor music, amplified or otherwise, must cease at 10 p.m. sharp. Any activity deemed a nuisance by 2 or more neighbors will result in an immediate $500 fine. Section 17. Commercial Activity. No property shall be used to conduct commercial activity of any kind. The wedding, as planned, did not just violate one rule. It violated the entire code. It was a contractual impossibility. This is our foundation, Avery said, tapping the document. This is the law of the land, and your mother is planning to break it in about 20 different ways. She does not care about rules, I said. She cares about appearances. Exactly, Avery smiled. Which is why we are going to use the rules to destroy her appearances. The next step was Avery's letter. It was a masterpiece of legal ambiguity. It was sent via certified mail to my mother's home. It was not a cease and desist. It was a prophylactic reminder. Dear Mrs. Whitaker, it read, it has come to our attention, as legal counsel for the property owner, Noelle Whitaker, that informal discussions regarding a potential large-scale gathering at the Cape May residence may be underway. We wish to prophylactically remind all associated parties that the property is strictly governed by the attached HOA bylaws. We draw your particular attention to Section 12, Subsection 4, regarding mass gatherings, and Section 19, regarding unauthorized structural alterations. The owner intends to enforce these bylaws to their fullest extent. We trust this clarifies the matter. My mother called me 30 seconds after she signed for it. I let it go to voicemail. The message was incandescent with rage. Noelle, how dare you? How dare you send a lawyer's letter to your own mother over a simple reminder? This is harassment. I know my rights. You are being pathetic and small. We will discuss this at dinner on Sunday. She had not read the letter. She had only seen the letterhead. She thought it was a bluff. She thought it was me, being difficult. She did not see the trap. She saw an obstacle to be bulldozed. She was so confident in her own will that she missed the legal landmine planted directly at her feet. She called the demolition company. I knew because they emailed me. Subject, consultation, Whitaker residence. Ms. Whitaker, your mother Marjorie has instructed us to proceed and that she will handle all permitting. We are officially scheduled for the Tuesday before the wedding. We require your signature on the attached liability waiver. I dragged the email to the evidence folder. Now, it was time for the offensive. I am a financial analyst. I analyze markets. I find undervalued assets and I leverage them. I opened my browser and began to search. I was not looking for lawyers. I was looking for location scouts. Cape May is desirable. My house, a $1.5 million modern masterpiece on a private waterfront, was not just desirable, it was a get. I found Granite Lantern Studios. They were a high-end production company specializing in luxury brand commercials and architectural magazine shoots. Their portfolio was all glass, steel, and water. My house was a perfect fit. I did not call as Noelle Whitaker. I sent an email from a new address. whitakerpropertymjmt@gmail.com. To the location manager, I wrote, "We are considering making the private waterfront property attached, C file, available for a limited commercial shoot. The property is located in Cape May, New Jersey. Please advise if this is of interest." They responded in 4 minutes. I negotiated with their locations manager, a man named Barry, purely over email. He wanted to know availability. "The property is currently occupied by the owner," I wrote. "However, we have one potential golden weekend of availability. The owner will be out of the country. That weekend is Saturday, September 20th. It was the exact date of the wedding. Barry wrote back, "That is an extremely tight window, but we are shooting a campaign for the new Audi electric coupe. The location is perfect. We will pay a premium." We settled on a figure. It was not $5,000. It was $20,000, plus a $2 million insurance rider. The contract arrived an hour later. It was 40 pages long. I read every word. I forwarded it to Avery. She redlined 3 clauses, strengthening the indemnification language and adding a force majeure clause that defined unauthorized civilian presence as a terminable breach. I signed it. The next day, Avery Cole, now acting as my property use attorney, filed the official paperwork with the Cape May City Clerk and Police Department. We were not filing for a party permit. We were filing for a commercial filming permit. This required a different level of clearance. It required a fire marshal walkthrough. It required a police detail. And it required, by law, the right to secure the perimeter. Avery filed for a permit for temporary structures. This was not for a wedding tent. It was for 6-foot-high temporary chain-link fencing with privacy screening, to be erected on the entire perimeter of my property line. She filed for a permit for temporary signage. These signs would be professionally printed. Warning: private property, commercial filming in progress. All unauthorized persons are subject to arrest for trespass. Cape May PD, case file, 45A882. She hand-delivered the finalized, notarized packet to the precinct, along with the certificate of insurance from Granite Lantern Studios and the non-emergency contact number for the head of the security detail we had hired. We now had a case file. We were a legitimate, insured, city-sanctioned commercial operation. The pieces were moving. My mother was signing contracts with caterers and demolition teams. I was signing contracts with production companies and security firms. We were 2 generals, moving armies across a map, and she had no idea my army was even on the field. I sat in Avery's office as we reviewed the final checklist. "Risk assessment," she said, pacing. "What are their assets?" 200 guests, I said. "A DJ, a catering staff of 30, a baby grand piano, a demolition crew. All liabilities," Avery countered. "Every single one is a violation of the HOA bylaws. The piano violates the structural load limits of the deck. The DJ violates the noise ordinance. The guest count violates the gathering limit. The caterer violates the commercial activity clause. And my assets? A notarized contract for $20,000, a city-issued filming permit, a $10 million insurance umbrella, a private security team with a direct line to the police dispatcher, and..." She tapped the blue-bound book. "The HOA bylaws. You are not a homeowner. Noelle, you are an insured, licensed, and legally protected commercial entity. They are just a very large, very illegal party." Avery had one last document prepared. It was a fully drafted temporary restraining order and civil trespass complaint. It named Marjorie Whitaker, Alan Whitaker, Brielle Whitaker, and Derek Lawson. It cited the audio recordings, The threatening voicemails, the fraudulent invoices, and the demolition contract. It was ready to be filed at a moment's notice. "This is our backup," she said. "If, by some miracle, they breach the perimeter, this is the kill switch, but I do not think we will need it." I looked at the stack of paper on her desk, the HOA bylaws, the granite lantern contract, the city permits, the security retainer. My mother's weapons were guilt, tradition, and screaming. My weapons were paper, contracts, and the cold, hard, unassailable logic of the law. I picked up the pen to sign the final security retainer. The pen was heavy. The signature was clean. Noelle Whitaker. It was not a scream. It was not an argument. It was the quiet, satisfying thud of a notary stamp hitting paper. It was the sound of the trap closing. It was 1 a.m. on a Wednesday. The city was quiet. I was in my apartment, analyzing the Vesper Ridge acquisition, trying to force my mind back into the clean world of numbers. My Project Whitaker file was minimized. The legal machinery was moving, silent and steady. I was just waiting. A knock. Not a buzz from the lobby. A knock on my actual apartment door. 20 floors up. My blood went cold. Only 3 people had that level of access. I checked the peephole. It was Brielle. She was alone. She was not wearing her usual curated, perfect outfit. She was in sweatpants and a university hoodie I had not seen in years. Her face was a wreck. Her eyes were swollen, red, and raw. I unlocked the deadbolt. "Noelle," she whispered. Her voice was cracked. She did not look at me. "Brielle, what is wrong?" She just shook her head, tears welling up again. She pushed past me and collapsed onto my sofa. She was holding her phone in one hand, gripping it like a lifeline. I closed the door. I did not say anything. I just went to the kitchen and put the kettle on. I came back and sat in the chair opposite her. She stared at the dark television screen for a long time. "I cannot do it," she finally said. So quiet I almost missed it. "Cannot do what?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "The wedding, Mom, Derek, any of it. I do not think I want to marry him." The admission hung in the air. This was a critical deviation in the data. My models were all built on the assumption that Brielle was a willing participant. "What happened?" "It is just all of it," she said, the words spilling out in a rush. "It is not mine. Nothing is mine." The kettle whistled. I made 2 cups of chamomile tea, set one in front of her. She wrapped her cold hands around the mug. "Mom picked the dress," Brielle said, her voice hollow. "I thought you loved that dress." I loved the one I wanted. At the first shop. It was simple, lace. Derek said it was understated. Mom said it looked common. So they found this other one. It is enormous. It has thousands of crystals. It is a $9,000 dress. Noelle. And I hate it. I look like a chandelier. She was sobbing now, quiet, gasping breaths. She picked the guests. I do not know half of them. They are her club friends. She picked the food. She picked the music. She even picked the time. 4 p.m. Because the sunset light at your house is best for the photos then. She looked up at me, her face desperate. "I am just an actress. Noelle. I am the lead in a play she wrote, and I do not even like the script." This was it. This was the moment. I could tell her. I could say, "Do not worry. It is not happening. I have hired a film crew, a security team, and the entire event is a legal impossibility." I looked at her, at this complete, broken-down version of my sister. She was not a co-conspirator. She was a victim. She was the project Marjorie had been working on her whole life, and the project was collapsing. If I told her my plan, what would she do? She would be terrified. She would run to Mom, try to fix it, try to mediate. The surprise, the clean, decisive stop I had planned, would be ruined. It would dissolve into another messy, screaming Whitaker family fight. And a smaller, colder part of me admitted, I was afraid it would hurt her. The humiliation I had planned was for Marjorie. Brielle would just be collateral damage. So I kept my weapon holstered. I did not reveal the film crew. This is your wedding, Brielle, I said, my voice softer than I intended. It is your life. Is it? She shot back, a flash of anger. Or is it just the payment? For everything, for being the pretty one, for not being smart like you. The guilt hit me then, a sharp, unexpected spike. Here I was, building a legal fortress, while she was trapped inside the very thing I had escaped. I had been so focused on protecting my property, I had forgotten she was property too. I let the feeling come. I analyzed it. It was regret for past inaction. I filed it. Then I let it go. Guilt was a luxury. Action was a necessity. This is not just about Mom, she said, wiping her nose. It is Derek. What about him? He gave me the prenup. This was new. Okay, that is standard for his family. I assume? I thought so. I was fine with it. But I read it. She laughed. A bitter, wet sound. I know. Me, reading a legal document. But I did. And it is weird. Noelle, it is not just about money if we divorce. She was scrolling frantically on her phone. It is about behavior. There are clauses. Public deportment. Social media representation. There is a penalty clause. If I bring disrepute to the Lawson name, my allowance stops. I went cold. An allowance? He is not putting me on any of his accounts, she whispered. He is giving me a monthly household and personal allowance, like a child or an employee. This was not a marriage. It was an acquisition. Derek was Marjorie's proxy. And there is more, she said, her voice dropping. He is so stupid. He forwarded the draft from his lawyer, but he did not just forward the attachment. He forwarded the whole email chain. And there is this name, Savannah Pierce. He wrote to his lawyer, my partner, Savannah Pierce, has reviewed this and agrees the terms are necessary to protect our shared assets. Who is Savannah Pierce? He told you, I said. His partner. He told me she is his business partner, an associate in Miami, just a colleague, but he is protecting their shared assets. From me, his wife. She looked at me, the final layer of denial cracking. He is not marrying me, is he? He is hiring me. She had figured it out. The beautiful, suggestible, soft clay sister had finally hit the bedrock of fact. I did not say, I told you so. I did not say, he is a monster. I did not offer any analysis at all. She did not need my logic. She needed her own. Forget him, I said. Forget Mom. Forget the house. Forget the 200 guests. I went to my desk and got a pad of paper, a yellow legal pad, and my favorite pen. What do you want, Brielle? Not what you do not want. What do you want? She looked at the blank paper as if it were an indictment. I do not know. Then it is time to find out. Write it down. A job, a place to live, a color, a feeling, anything. Start with one true thing. She took the pen. She stared at the page. We sat in silence. The only sound was the hum of the city and the occasional sniffle. We just drank our tea. For the first time, we were not the smart one and the pretty one. We were just two sisters, sitting on the same side of the wreckage. After an hour, she had written 3 things: sunsets, a dog, to learn how to bake. It was a start. She fell asleep on my sofa around 3 a.m. I covered her with a blanket. I looked at the legal pad. It was the most honest document our family had ever produced. She left at 6 a.m., before the sun came up, while I was making coffee. She looked embarrassed, hungover from the emotion. Thank you, Noelle. Anytime, B. I still do not know what to do. You know what to do, I said. You just have not decided to do it yet, but you will. I cannot, she whispered, her hand on the doorknob. Mom, the deposits, it would kill her. It is not your job to manage her feelings. It never was. She just shook her head, unable to take that final step. She hugged me, tight, and then she was gone. I turned back to the sofa. She had left a mess of tissues and something else. A piece of paper had fallen out of her hoodie pocket. It was the invoice, Bella Bridal Boutique, for one custom couture crystal gown. The total, with rush alterations, $9,200. Paid in full. Card holder, Marjorie Whitaker. But that was not the interesting part. The interesting part was the ship to address. It was not Mom's house. It was not Derek's apartment. She was having the dress shipped to my house, to the Cape May house. I took a photo of the invoice, another piece of paper for the file, another nail. I felt a strange, cold calm. The moral ambiguity of my plan was fading. This was no longer just about property. It was a rescue mission. Brielle was trapped. She did not have the strength to leave, so I would have to make them leave her. My promise was real. If you want out, I will open the door. The film crew, I realized, was not just a legal shield, it was the door. My phone buzzed, a text message. It was not Brielle. It was Mom. I had not heard from her directly since the lawyer's letter. She had been communicating at me, through vendors and voicemails. The tone of this text was shockingly bright. Darling, I know you have been busy with that Vesper Ridge deal. We miss you. Just wanted to let you know. The Cape May local paper is doing a wonderful feature on the wedding and on the house. We gave them a lovely interview. It is all about the Whitaker family legacy and how wonderful it is to pass down traditions. It should be out this weekend. Just wanted to share the good news. My blood ran cold. A newspaper. She had not just lied to her friends. She had not just lied to the vendors. She was publishing the lie. She was creating a public record of her ownership claim. I opened my laptop. I knew the editor of the Cape May Chronicle from a local business luncheon. I sent him a polite email. Whitaker feature. Hi, Charles. I hear my mother spoke to you about my property. As the sole owner, I would love to see the draft for a simple fact check before it goes to print. Just want to ensure all the architectural details are correct. Best, Noel. He replied in 10 minutes. Of course, Noel. Happy to. We are so thrilled to feature the Whitaker family home. It is a beautiful story. The draft was attached. I read it. It was a masterpiece of fiction. It quoted my mother extensively. We built this house as a family legacy, a place for our children and grandchildren. Noel has been a wonderful steward, but it has always been the family asset. We are so thrilled to host Brielle's wedding here, as the first of many generational celebrations. I stopped reading. This was not just a social lie anymore. This was libel. This was a fraudulent, public claim against a $1.5 million asset. I saved the PDF. I saved the email from the editor. I added them to the file, under a new subfolder, defamation. The trap did not even need to be set anymore. She was walking into it, blindfolded, while broadcasting her intentions on a megaphone. Saturday, September 20th, the day of the wedding. I was not at the house. I was in a small, second-floor coffee shop with tinted windows, a quarter-mile down the road. It had a perfect, unobstructed view of the entrance to my street. I had been there since 5 a.m. I had a lukewarm coffee in my hand and my phone, set to silent, on the table. Avery was on standby. The private security team, 6 of them, had been on site since 4 a.m., parked in an unmarked van. At 5:55 a.m., the sun was just beginning to burn the mist off the water. The street was silent. At 6 a.m. on the dot, the convoy arrived. It was not a small operation. 2 massive Granite Lantern Studios production trucks, a generator truck, and 3 equipment vans. They moved with quiet, professional efficiency. There was no shouting, just men in black shirts speaking into headsets. The first thing they did was unload the fencing. Within 30 minutes, a 6-foot-high temporary chain-link fence, complete with black privacy screening, encircled the entire perimeter of my property line, right down to the legal title mark on the beach. It was a stark black wall. The second thing they did was hang the signs. They were large, plastic, and professionally printed. Warning: private property, commercial filming in progress, no trespassing. All unauthorized persons are subject to arrest per Cape May PD case file 45A882. At 7:30 a.m., the head of the security detail, a calm man named Harris, walked the perimeter. He posted 2 guards at the newly created single-entry checkpoint. My fortress was now physically, as well as legally, secure. At 8 a.m., the Audi coupe arrived on a flatbed. It was covered in a black silk sheet. The film crew began to assemble their massive light rigs on the lawn. I just watched. I drank my coffee. At 8:45 a.m., the first of Marjorie's army arrived, a floral van. The driver, a man in a polo shirt, pulled up to the fence, looked at the sign, and got out of his van, clipboard in hand. I could see him talking to the guard. Harris. Harris just shook his head and pointed to the sign. The driver grew agitated. He pointed toward my house. Harris stood, immovable, arms crossed. The van was forced to park down the street, blocking a driveway. At 8:55 a.m., the catering trucks arrived, 2 of them. They were massive. They could not even turn onto the street, which was now partially blocked by the floral van. The head caterer got out, screaming into his phone. At 9 a.m., the DJ, then, the truck from White Glove Rentals. It was carrying the 200 Chiavari chairs, the string quartet setup, and, I saw with a grim fascination, the white baby grand piano. The street was now in chaos. It was a complete bottleneck. Truck drivers were laying on their horns. Vendors were standing in the street, all yelling at Harris and his guard, who were calmly checking their clipboards and shaking their heads. "You are not on the access list. This is a closed film set." I saw one of them hold up a piece of paper, Avery's packet, the insurance rider, the city permit, a wall of paper. This was the moment. At 9:10 a.m., my mother's white Lexus turned the corner. It was followed by a white limousine. The Lexus skidded to a halt. Marjorie got out. She was wearing a custom-made white silk suit. A fascinator perched in her perfectly highlighted hair. She looked like a general, ready to inspect her troops. Her face, even from a quarter-mile away, was a mask of confusion and mounting rage. She strode toward Harris. The limousine door opened. Brielle emerged. She was in the dress, the $9,000 crystal-encrusted gown. It was enormous. In the harsh morning light, she looked like a snow queen, pale and terrified. My father got out after her, looking sick. Marjorie began to scream. I could not hear the words, but I could see the motion. Her arms were waving. She was stabbing her finger at Harris's chest. She was pointing at the house, her house, the family asset. Harris did not move. He was a rock. I saw him calmly point to one of the signs. Then I saw him point to the HOA bylaws, which he was holding in his hand. He was pointing to Section 12, Subsection 4, the 60-person limit. Marjorie's face turned a deep, blotchy red. She shoved him. That was the line. Harris did not shove back. He stepped aside and spoke into his radio. At 9:20 a.m., exactly as Avery had planned, the Cape May police cruiser rolled onto the scene. 2 officers got out. They did not go to Marjorie. They went to Harris. Harris handed them his clipboard, the permits, the case file number, the insurance, the notarized contract from Granite Lantern Studios. One officer reviewed the packet. The other officer walked over to my mother, Marjorie. Marjorie launched into her performance. I could see the gestures. This is my daughter's wedding. This is my house, family, tradition. She was trying to override the law with the sheer force of her will. The officer listened. He looked at her. He looked at the chaos of trucks. He looked at the legal permit in his partner's hand. He shook his head. He spoke to her. His body language was calm, but final. He was explaining the law. He was explaining that she was the one causing the disturbance, that she had no permit, that the film crew did, that this was a civil matter, and that if she did not lower her voice and move her vehicle, she would be cited for disturbing the peace. Marjorie looked, for the first time in her life, completely and utterly powerless. And then I saw the groom. Derek had gotten out of the front seat of the limousine. He had been on his phone the entire time, standing near the curb, well away from the confrontation. He was not looking at his crying bride. He was not defending his future mother-in-law. He was watching the police officer shake his head. He was watching the vendors, who were now swarming Marjorie, their own clipboards out, demanding payment, demanding to know what was going on. He was, I knew, running the numbers. He was assessing the liability. This was not the seamless merger into a wealthy family asset he had been promised. This was a public relations disaster. This was a financial black hole. He clicked his phone off. He said something to the limo driver. He got back into the front seat. Not the back, with Brielle. The limousine began a slow 20-point turn in the narrow street. Brielle just stood there, on the pavement, in her massive dress. She watched the limousine drive away. She did not move. Then she put her hands to her face, and she crumpled. My father, useless as ever, just patted her back. The dam broke. Guests, dressed in cocktail attire and summer suits, had begun to arrive. They parked their cars and walked into the middle of a war zone. They saw the police. They saw the screaming vendors. They saw Marjorie, her face a mask of purple rage, now yelling at my father. They saw Brielle, weeping on the curb. And they did what people do. They pulled out their phones. Within minutes, the Whitaker-Lawson wedding was a live stream. It was a hashtag. Cape May meltdown. Bride abandoned. I saw Mrs. Henderson's son, the social media manager, filming with a professional look of detached interest. This was content. My mother's ultimate nightmare. Not just a failure, but a public, viral humiliation, witnessed by the very people she was trying to impress. The vendors closed in. We need the cancellation fee. Our staff has been here for 3 hours. Who is paying for the piano? Marjorie just shrieked, a high, keening sound of pure animal fury. She turned on the catering manager. She turned on the police officer. She blamed the truck drivers. She blamed the film crew. She blamed Harris. She blamed everyone but herself. Inside the perimeter, the Granite Lantern crew did not pause. They had a job to do. They were on a schedule. They had an insured, permitted location. The chaos outside the fence was not their problem. A massive light rig, aimed at the sky, suddenly flared to life. It was a pure, white, unforgiving beam. It illuminated the entire scene, my weeping sister, my furious mother, the confused guests, the angry vendors, and the impassive police. It was a movie set, and they were the unpaid extras. I looked down at my hands. They were clenched so tightly my knuckles were white. I had a flash of Brielle's face, the genuine, agonizing pain. The guilt was a sharp, physical jab. I took a deep breath. This is the surgery. I told myself, this is the only way. I stood up. I left a $20 bill on the table for the coffee. I walked out the back entrance of the cafe, down a different street. My phone buzzed. It was Avery. It is done, she texted. I replied with one word. Yes. The fortress was secure. The storm was making landfall. I did not need to stay and watch the wreckage. I had work to do. My phone began to detonate before I had even reached my car. It did not stop. For 48 hours, it was a sustained, high-frequency assault. I did not recognize most of the numbers. They were the vendors, the caterer, the rental company, the florist, the DJ, the demolition crew, who, I learned, had arrived at 10 a.m. to find a police presence and a film crew. Their messages were a chorus of rage, confusion, and financial demands. They had contracts signed by Marjorie. They had verbal agreements. They had email chains. They had non-refundable deposits. And they had cancellation fees that amounted to, by my rough estimate, over $70,000. They were all, to a man, looking for the person with the $1.5 million house to pay the bill. My family, naturally, was incommunicado. Marjorie's phone went straight to voicemail. Brielle's was off. Alan's was, as always, silent. They had gone to ground, leaving me to face the shrapnel of the bomb they had built. I let them all go to voicemail, every single one. I replied to only one group, the vendors who had my Vesper Ridge email. I created a group message. To all concerned parties, I wrote, I am not a signatory on any contract related to the Whitaker-Lawson wedding. I did not authorize any services. I did not request any rentals, demolition, or catering. Any and all invoices sent to me are fraudulent. I will not be paying 1 cent. For further inquiries, please contact my legal counsel, Avery Cole. I hit send. Then I blocked every number I did not recognize. I muted my family's text threads. I went dark. For 2 weeks, there was silence. I returned to my life. I went to the Vesper Ridge office. I finalized the acquisition. I sat in quiet, sterile conference rooms, and negotiated non-compete clauses. I went to the gym. I swam laps in the city pool. The smell of chlorine a clean, chemical bleach for my thoughts. I slept. For the first time in months. I slept through the entire night. The fortress in Cape May was quiet. The film shoot had wrapped, leaving no trace. Granite Lantern Studios had already direct deposited the $20,000 location fee into my account. The house had not only defended itself, it had generated a profit. The Cape May meltdown hashtag had burned itself out, replaced by another, newer scandal. The incident was over. I had won. Then, 2 weeks and 3 days after the wedding that wasn't, an unknown number rang on my phone. I let it go to voicemail. A message appeared. It was my father. His voice was a reedy, thin whisper. I had to turn the volume all the way up. Noelle. It is Dad. Please call me. It is about your mother. She is not well. She is very, very unwell. I deleted the message. It was the old script, the manufacturing of a crisis, the guilt invoice. I was not paying. 3 days later, my phone buzzed again, a text from my aunt. Noelle, I am praying for Marjorie. I had no idea. If you need anything... What? I opened my social media accounts for the first time in weeks, and there it was. Marjorie's feed. It was a new post, a picture of her, not in a silk suit, but in a pale blue bathrobe. She was in her bed. Her face was pale, her eyes closed. She looked frail. The caption was a novel. To my dear friends, I have debated whether to share this, but I feel I must be transparent. The immense stress and shock of the past few weeks have triggered a dormant, rare autoimmune disorder. My doctors are concerned. It affects the nerves, and the path forward is long and very, very expensive. I have been told I cannot work or even leave the house for the foreseeable future. Many of you have asked how you can help. My friends have set up a contribution page for my medical journey. The link is in my bio. Please pray for us. A contribution page, a GoFundMe. I clicked the link, the Marjorie Whitaker Medical Journey. The goal was set at $50,000. She had already raised $32,000. The comments were a flood of sympathetic poison. Marjorie, you are the strongest woman I know. You will beat this. Sending all our love, just contributed. That horrible Derek. What he and your daughter put you through. Unspeakable. I read that again. What he and your daughter. The narrative had been reset. I was no longer the victim of a property theft. I was the co-conspirator. I was the source of the acute stress that had manufactured this illness. I felt the room tilt. This was not a retreat. This was a new war. She had pivoted from social fraud to medical fraud. I did not get angry. I did not call Avery. I opened Project Whitaker. I created a new top-level folder. Fraud. My first instinct was to burn her to the ground, to post the audio files, to send the Cape May Chronicle a screenshot of her demolition email, to contact GoFundMe and have the page shut down. Avery's voice echoed in my head. Let them escalate. To expose her now would be a he said, she said. It would be an ugly public fight. I would be the bitter daughter attacking her sick mother. I would lose the narrative. No, a counter-argument was not enough. I needed a complete, irrefutable prosecution. The scalpel, not the hammer. I began to build the new case. I went to my Evidence Phase 2 folder. I pulled the draft of the Cape May Chronicle interview, the one where she claimed a generational legacy. It was dated 1 week before her illness began. I went to my aunt's social media page. I scrolled back 2 weeks. There it was, a photo from the country club's fall gala. It was dated 4 days after the failed wedding. There was Marjorie, in a new sequined dress, smiling, glass of champagne in hand. I saved the photo. I saved the timestamp. I put it in the fraud folder, right next to the picture of her in the pale blue bathrobe. The acute, debilitating illness had apparently taken a 4-day break for a party. The case was building, but it was missing a piece. Derek. He had vanished. He had driven away, leaving his bride on the curb. He had not been heard from since. He had deleted all his social media. He was a ghost. I am a financial analyst. I do not find people. I find assets. I spent $500 on a deep-level public record search. I ran a search on Derek Lawson. I found his LLCs, 3 of them, all registered in Delaware, all shell companies. But one, Lawson Miami Properties LLC, had a co-filer, a partner, Savannah Pierce. I remembered the name from Brielle's late-night confession, the business partner. I ran a search on Savannah Pierce. Her digital footprint was clean, professional, a Miami real estate broker. Her professional website was all gloss and glass towers. Her social media was locked down tight. But the people she worked with were not. I spent 3 hours cross-referencing her sold listings with the social media accounts of her clients. I found a broker at her firm who had tagged her in a team celebration post. I clicked the tag. Savannah's account was private, but her tagged photos were public. I scrolled, and I scrolled, through 3 years of charity galas, boat shows, and client dinners. And there it was. The photo was posted by a Miami nightclub promoter. It was dated September 17th, 3 days before Brielle's wedding. The picture was on a yacht, sunset, champagne. Derek was in the photo, his arm around Savannah, and on Savannah's left hand, a diamond ring that dwarfed the one he had given Brielle. The promoter's caption: "Congrats to the power couple. Derek Lawson and Savannah Pierce are off the market. He finally put a ring on it. Miami royalty." He had not just been protecting their assets from Brielle. He was already engaged to someone else. My sister's wedding was not just a social climb, it was a fraud. He was, in all likelihood, a bigamist. I did not hesitate. I did not consider the fallout. This was not strategy. This was mercy. I created a new email. I addressed it to Brielle's personal account. The subject line was, "Read this, N." I attached everything: the Delaware LLC registration, the partner agreement for Lawson Miami Properties, the screenshot of the yacht, the close-up on the ring, the timestamp. I hit send. My phone rang 4 minutes later. It was Brielle. I answered. "Hello, B?" The sound that came through the phone was not a cry. It was a guttural, terrifying wail. It was the sound of a person's entire reality being ripped apart. The fog did not just clear, it was vaporized. We cried, she in heaving, gasping sobs, me in cold, silent tears of rage I did not know I possessed. "I am coming over," I said. When I got to her apartment, the one Derek was paying for, it was a war zone. Clothes were everywhere, smashed picture frames. The $9,000 wedding dress was in a heap on the floor, covered in what looked like red wine. "He called me," she whispered. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by the wreckage. Her eyes were black. "When?" "An hour ago, after your email. He called from a blocked number. He said if I ever contact him or Savannah again, he will sue me for harassment. He said the prenup I signed is still valid as a non-disclosure agreement. He said he has already canceled the lease on this apartment. I have to be out by the 1st. She was being erased. "You are not," I said. "You are coming with me." That night, she moved into my city apartment, and she started to talk. She knew. "Noelle," she said, late that night. "Mom, she had to have known." What do you mean? This whole week, after the wedding, I have been at their house, in my old room, hiding, crying, and Mom, she just kept saying, "He will be back. Darling, he just got cold feet. We will give it a week, and then we will call his mother." She was not even angry at him. She was just annoyed about the optics. Brielle had been going through her old room, cleaning, throwing things out, and in the back of her closet, under a pile of old yearbooks, she found a set of boxes. "Mom's old notebooks," she said. "From when we were kids, not diaries, planners." She had brought them with her. She pushed one across the coffee table. I opened it. It was my mother's perfect looping script. It was a ledger, but not of money, of behavior. Noelle, age 12. Refused to wear the blue dress to the recital. Spoke back. Punishment. Remind her of the cost of the piano lessons. Withhold praise. Brielle, age 9. Cried when she did not get the lead in the play. Punishment. Explain that her value is in her beauty, and that crying makes her ugly. General note. A child's debt is a mother's bond. They must be made to feel the weight of what has been given to them. Guilt is the ballast that keeps them from drifting away. It went on, for years. Page after page of methodical, psychological manipulation, a user's manual for her own children. I closed the book. My hands were shaking. My phone rang. It was my father, his real number. "I need to see you," he said. His voice was not a whisper. It was a rasp. "Both of you." We met him at a coffee shop in Cherry Hill. He looked like he had aged 10 years. He was holding his own manila folder. "Brielle showed me the notebooks," he said. He would not look at either of us. He just stared into his coffee. I did not know. I did not know it was like that." "You knew," I said, my voice flat. "You were the accountant. Dad, you just did not want to see the liability." He flinched. Maybe so. But this new thing, the fundraiser, it is a crime, Noelle." "I know." "I have been going through my own files," he said. He opened the folder. He pushed a stack of receipts across the table. They were credit card statements, Marjorie's. "This is the GoFundMe money," he said, his fingers shaking as he pointed to the deposit. $32,000. "And here are the expenditures, from the same account, the day after the fundraiser started." I read them. Cherry Hills Country Club, $8,450. Payment on overdue house account. Saks Fifth Avenue, $4,200. Handbag, Sterling PR Associates, $10,000. Retainer. "She is not paying for doctors. Noelle," he whispered. "She is paying a public relations firm. She is trying to buy her reputation back." I looked at Brielle. Her face was pale, set like stone. I looked at my father, a man so broken he was finally, after 30 years, whole. I had it all, the audio files, the contracts, the fraud, the bigamy, the psychological ledgers, the financial proof. This was not a scalpel. This was a tactical nuclear weapon. I closed the folder. "No more whispers," I said. "No more hiding." I looked at my father. "You will call her. You will tell her there is a family meeting. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m., at your house. Attendance is not optional." He just nodded. "What are you going to do?" "I am a financial analyst," I said, standing up. "I am going to present my findings." We sat in the living room of my childhood. It was a stage set for a life I no longer participated in. The air was heavy, stale with the smell of old polish and unspoken agreements. It was 7 p.m. I was at the head of the dining room table, which I had commandeered. My laptop was open, connected to the large television on the wall. Brielle sat to my right, pale but rigid. She had the stack of Marjorie's notebooks in front of her. My father sat at the other end of the table, his manila folder of bank statements aligned perfectly with the edge of the wood. We were 3 members of a board, waiting for the CEO we were about to fire. Derek, as expected, was absent. He was a ghost, a bad debt already written off the books. At 7:05, we heard her key in the lock. Marjorie entered, not as a patient, but as a queen. She was wearing expensive-looking cream-colored loungewear. She was still performing convalescence. "Alan, what on earth is this? You sounded so grim," she began, a note of weary grievance in her voice. She saw me. Her eyes narrowed. "Noelle and Brielle, a little family ambush?" "Sit down, Mother," I said. My voice was flat. It was not a request. She looked at my father, expecting him to protest. He just stared at the table. She looked at Brielle, who met her gaze with a coldness Marjorie had never seen before. Surprised by the unified front, she sat. She chose the armchair, trying to separate herself from the tribunal at the table. "This is ridiculous," she sniffed. "I am not well. You all know what I have been through." "We know what you have claimed," I said. I clicked the remote. The television screen lit up. "I am a financial analyst," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet room. "My job is to find discrepancies in the data, and your story, Mother, is full of them. I am here to present my findings." The first slide appeared. It was a split screen. On the left, the photo of her in the pale blue bathrobe, eyes closed, face pale, the GoFundMe post. Date, October 2nd. Caption, "Struggling with a debilitating autoimmune disorder." On the right, the photo from the country club fall gala, her, in the sequined dress, raising a glass of champagne. Date, October 6th. "This is the first discrepancy," I said. "A debilitating illness that allowed for a 4-hour gala. Your social media presence, Mother, is your worst witness." "How dare you?" she hissed. "I had a good day. I am allowed one good day. My friends forced me to go." I clicked to the next slide, a spreadsheet. "Let us talk about the fundraiser," I said. On the left, the deposits, $32,450, raised from your friends, our relatives, and sympathetic strangers, all for medical expenses. I pointed to the right side of the screen, and on the right, the expenditures, from the same account, October 3rd, $10,000 to Sterling PR Associates. October 4th, $4,200 to Saks Fifth Avenue. October 4th, $8,450 to the Cherry Hills Country Club. I looked up from the laptop. "You did not pay for doctors. You paid for a handbag. You paid your overdue club dues. And you paid a public relations firm to salvage the reputation you destroyed." Marjorie stood up. "This is a lie. It is a twisting of the facts. Everything I did for this family. I did it to protect our name. The name you dragged through the mud with your selfish, monstrous little stunt at the beach house. I did it. I did it out of love." "Love," I repeated. The word sounded absurd. "That is your defense. Let us talk about that." I clicked to the next slide. It was a screenshot of the GoFundMe terms of service. I had highlighted one section. Section 4, User Conduct. You are not permitted to, quote, "create a fundraiser with the implicit or explicit purpose of misrepresenting a person, product, or situation. You are not allowed to use funds for any purpose other than the stated purpose of the fundraiser. What you call love, Mother, the federal government calls wire fraud." Her face went white. The word fraud hung in the air, sucking the oxygen out of the room. You would not," she whispered. "I would not have to," my father said. It was the first time he had spoken. His voice was gravelly, but it did not shake. Marjorie turned to him, her eyes wide with betrayal. "Alan?" He stood up, his hands resting on his own pile of papers, the bank statements. "I am the one who saw the statements. Marjorie, I am the one who saw the transfer to the PR firm. I have been your accountant for 30 years. I have balanced your books. I have moved money to cover your ambitions. But this," he shook his head, "this is a crime. You used our friends. You used our family. You used our name to commit theft." "Alan, I am your wife. And I am your victim," he said. "You have two options. 1. You shut down the fundraiser tonight. You issue a full public refund of every single cent to every single donor. And you check yourself into a 12-week therapeutic program. I have the brochure here. He slid it across the table. 2. You do nothing, and I will take this folder, and I will walk into the Cherry Hills police station. I will sign the complaint myself, and I will testify. Marjorie stared at him, speechless. The man who had spent 3 decades vanishing into the wallpaper was now holding the match. She looked at Brielle, her last hope. Brielle, baby, tell them how stressed I have been. Tell them it was all for you. Brielle looked down at the notebooks in front of her. She opened the first one. I will read you what you told me, Brielle said, her voice small but clear. Page 42. How to train Brielle for social advancement. Marjorie's face went from pale to ashen. Brielle, no, that is private. Quote, Brielle continued, her voice gaining strength. Brielle's value is her beauty and her compliance. She must be trained to associate social success with maternal approval. A good marriage is not about love. It is about merging assets. Her feelings are a liability. Brielle looked up, her eyes bright with tears, but not of sadness, of rage. You were not planning a wedding for me, Brielle said. You were executing a merger. You did not care about Derek. You did not care about me. You only cared about the assets. You trained me to be a product, and you got mad when the sale fell through. You were not protecting me. You were liquidating me. Marjorie finally broke. She collapsed into the armchair. The sobs were real this time. They were the ugly, choking sounds of total, irreversible defeat. No performance, no strategy. Just the raw, animal noise of an empress who had just seen her entire kingdom burn. She cried, and the 3 of us just watched. We waited. After a full minute, I spoke. The crying does not stop the consequences, I said. This is not a negotiation. These are the terms of your surrender. I slid a new document across the table. It had come from Avery Cole's office, delivered by courier that afternoon. This is a binding civil agreement. It outlines the terms my father just gave you. I listed them, checking them off with my pen. Yeah, you will log in to GoFundMe right now, at this table, and permanently disable the fundraiser. 2. You will issue a full refund to all donors, with a public apology for misrepresenting the nature of your medical needs. Avery drafted the text. You will post it verbatim. 3. You will begin a minimum 12-week course of therapy. We will require receipts for payment. 4. You will never, in public or private, refer to my property as a family asset again. 5. You will never use my name, my likeness, or images of my home for any purpose, social or financial, ever again. If you violate any of these terms, this document becomes the primary exhibit in the civil fraud suit we will file against you. And my father, I looked at him, will file his police report. Do you understand? She just nodded, her face buried in her hands. Sign it, I said. I pushed the pen toward her. She signed, her signature a jagged, broken line. My father signed as the witness. It was done. I closed my laptop. The television screen went black. The hearing was over. Brielle, who had been silent, opened her own laptop. She turned it so Marjorie could see. It was an email, addressed to the entire 200-person wedding guest list. Subject: Wedding cancellation and personal apology. Dear friends and family, she read aloud, I am writing to officially inform you that my wedding to Derek Lawson is canceled. This is not a postponement. This is a permanent dissolution. I have learned that Mr. Lawson was, and is, engaged to his business partner in Miami, Ms. Savannah Pierce. She attached the photo of Derek and Savannah on the yacht. I apologize deeply for the chaos and confusion surrounding the event. I was misled by more than one person. I am taking this time to heal and to rediscover my own path. I will be in touch when I'm ready. Sincerely, Brielle Whitaker. She hit send. Marjorie made a small, wounded sound, but did not speak. I stood up. My part was over. I sent 2 final emails from my phone. The first was to the HOA board. Dear board, thank you for your support. Please be advised the family matter regarding my property is resolved. There will be no further disturbances. Best, Noelle Whitaker. The second was to Granite Lantern Studios. Dear Barry, the location is now quiet and secure. Thank you again for your professionalism. It was a pleasure doing business with you. Noelle Whitaker. I put my phone in my pocket. I looked at my father, who was just staring at his wife. I looked at Brielle, who was closing her laptop with a look of terrifying, newfound peace. The war was over. The books were balanced. I picked up my bag and walked out of the house I grew up in, and I did not look back. The annual Cherry Hills Country Club Gala was, for my mother, the apex of the social calendar. It was her Super Bowl. It was the night she lived for, the room she worked all year to command. 1 month after the family hearing, the gala invitations went out, and for the first time, 3 members of the Whitaker family RSVP'd without consulting the 4th. I wore a dark navy blue silk dress. Brielle, beside me, was in a simple, elegant black. She looked lighter than I had ever seen her, as if a physical weight had been lifted from her bones. My father, in his best suit, walked between us. We were not a family. We were a delegation. We entered the ballroom. The music stopped, not literally, but the chatter did. The heads turned, the whispers, which had been circulating for a month, coalesced into a sharp, unified wave of silence. Marjorie was already there. She was not at a prominent table. She was at a small two-top, near the back, by the kitchens. She was wearing a subdued gray dress. She was alone. Her PR firm had, apparently, advised a look of quiet contrition. The club president, a woman named Mrs. DuPont, who had been at the Rittenhouse Grill dinner, approached the podium. "Welcome, friends," she said, her voice amplified by the microphone. "We are here tonight to support the Children's Literacy Fund, and this year, we have a small piece of club business to attend to before the auction. Mrs. Marjorie Whitaker has a statement she would like to make." A spotlight, harsh and white, swung to the back of the room and found my mother. She walked to the stage, not with her usual glide, but with a slow, heavy step. She was holding a single index card. She looked small. My dear friends," she began, her voice trembling. It was the same tremor from the Rittenhouse Grill, but this time, it was real. I am here tonight to make an apology, a profound one." She detailed it all, reading from the script Avery Cole had drafted and we had approved. "I must announce that the Marjorie Whitaker Medical Journey fundraiser has been officially closed," she said, her voice cracking. "It has come to my attention that I misrepresented the nature of my medical needs. A full refund has been issued to every single donor. You should have received your alerts already." A low, shocked murmur rippled through the room. "The stress of recent family events," she continued, "led me to make a series of profound and unforgivable errors in judgment. I betrayed your trust, and for that, I am, and will be, eternally sorry." She finished. She stood there, waiting. The silence was deafening. A man in the front stood up. It was Mr. Henderson, also from the Rittenhouse. "That is all well and good, Marjorie," he boomed, his voice angry. "But what about the other business? You told us all, right here in this club, that your daughter's beach house was the family asset, that it was a legacy. You used that story to build your reputation. Was that also a misrepresentation?" The room went silent again. This was the real question. The money was one thing, the lie was another. Marjorie looked cornered. Her eyes darted to me, a look of pure, desperate appeal. "Help me." I stood up. I did not walk to the stage. I just spoke from my place at the table. My voice, in the quiet, carried perfectly. "I can answer that, Mr. Henderson," I said. I held up a single, folded document. "This is the true and certified copy of the deed to the property in Cape May, pulled from the county registrar's office this morning." I unfolded it. It lists one name, Mine, Noelle Whitaker, sole owner. There is no trust. There is no legacy. There is no family asset. The story was, as you suggested, a complete fiction. Mr. Henderson stared at me. Then he looked at Marjorie. He did not look sympathetic. Mrs. DuPont returned to the podium. Thank you, Noelle, for that clarification. She looked at Marjorie, her expression like ice. The board has met. In light of these events, both the financial and the social misrepresentations, we are formally suspending Marjorie Whitaker's membership from this club for a period of 6 months. At the end of that time, she may reapply, pending a full review. It was a death sentence, a 6-month banishment. It was the final, public execution of her social identity. Marjorie just nodded, turned, and walked off the stage. She did not return to her table. She walked straight out the ballroom doors. The president cleared her throat. Now, she said, forcing a smile, let us begin the auction. I turned to my father. It is done. No, he said, a strange look on his face. Not quite. There is one last thing. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, thin file. Not the manila folder from the hearing. This was different. I held this back, he said, his voice low. I did not know if it was the right time, but now it is. He handed it to me. I opened it. It was, as I expected, his neat, archived collection of receipts. But these were different. These were photocopies, a paper trail he had been secretly building, not just of her spending, but of her intent. There was a copy of a rental agreement for the baby grand piano, dated 3 days before the Rittenhouse Grill dinner. There was a copy of the demolition team's consultation notes, and then, at the very bottom, there was one sheet of paper that made my blood run cold. It was a draft, a special event application for the city of Cape May. It was blank, but it had notes scribbled in the margin, in my mother's handwriting, and at the bottom, on the owner's signature line, she had been practicing. Noelle Whitaker. Noelle Whitaker. N. Whitaker. She had not just planned to steal the house, she had planned to forge my signature to get the permits to do it. I looked at my father. She was going to commit forgery. I found it in her desk, the week before the wedding, he whispered. That is when I knew. That is when I knew it was not just arrogance, that it was criminal. I knew you were smart, Noelle. I knew you had a plan. I held this as my own insurance, in case your plan failed. I slid the paper back into the file. The final piece of evidence, the one I did not even know existed. Noelle, Mrs. DuPont was at our table. That was intense, but I have to say, that was an incredible clarification. I smiled. Thank you, but I am not done. I stood up. Mrs. DuPont, I would like to make a contribution to the Children's Literacy Fund. That is wonderful, Noelle. How much? $20,000, I said. The room gasped. But, I continued, I would also like to announce the formation of a new fund. As you all know, my sister Brielle and I have recently extricated ourselves from a difficult situation. In honor of that, we are establishing the Whitaker Coastal Fund. It is a nonprofit foundation, seeded with the profits from a recent commercial contract on my Cape May property. I looked at Brielle. She stood up next to me. The fund, Brielle said, her voice clear and strong, will provide grants and pro bono legal support for women in our community seeking to leave financially or emotionally controlling relationships. We are turning our family asset into a community asset. It was a masterstroke. We had not just won. We had retaken the narrative. We were not the victims. We were the founders. The story was no longer about revenge. It was about reconstruction. The ballroom erupted in applause. Genuine, sustained applause. My father stood and clapped with them, tears streaming down his face. Later that night, we stood outside. My father was seeing a therapist. He and my mother were in a trial separation. I am proud of you, Noelle, he said. Both of you. I nodded. It was, perhaps, the first honest sentence he had ever spoken to me. Brielle was not coming home with him. She had enrolled in community college, in a pastry arts program. She had a new, small, one-bedroom apartment. "I will see you Sunday for dinner?" she asked me. "I will be there," I said. "My treat." I drove back to Cape May, back to the fortress. It was midnight. The house was dark and silent. I turned on one small lamp. The air smelled of salt and clean. Empty space. I went to my office. I opened the floor safe. I took out the Project Whitaker file. I added my father's final folder to it. The forgery attempt. I took the entire thick stack of evidence, the audio files, the contracts, the screenshots, the bank statements, the notebooks, the deed, and I sealed it in a large archival box. I labeled it Whitaker v. Whitaker, closed. I placed it in the back of the safe. It was not a weapon anymore. It was just a historical record. The war was over. The victory was documented. On my desk, a single white envelope had been left by the film crew. Granite Lantern Studios. I opened it. It was not an invoice. It was a letter. "Dear Ms. Whitaker, the Audi shoot was a spectacular success. The client is ecstatic. They have asked. In fact, if you would be open to a long-term contract, they would like to purchase exclusive photography rights to the property for their next 5 campaigns. The enclosed is a preliminary offer." I looked at the number. It was significant. I smiled. My mother had tried to turn my house into a family asset. Instead, I had turned her drama into a legitimate, 6-figure revenue stream. I put the letter down. I walked out onto the main terrace. The temporary fence was long gone. The moon was full, illuminating a perfect, silver line on the water. The waves were a steady, predictable rhythm. I stood there. On the porch they had tried to steal. In the house I had defended. I had not screamed. I had not cried. I had not argued. I had documented. I had filed. I had signed. I had not taken revenge. I had just enforced the terms. I had established the boundaries. I had closed the account. And now, finally, I was free to live my own life, in my own house, by my own rules. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I am curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments. I would love to connect with you and hear your thoughts. Please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and if you want to support us, hit that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.